Amara never thought life could change so quickly. One ordinary morning in Kisumu, she was folding laundry, humming softly, when Jelani left the house without a word. At first, she thought he had just gone for a walk, but then the truth hit her like a storm. He wasn't coming back. He had chosen Sefu, his ex, leaving Amara alone while she carried their child. The emptiness he left behind felt heavier than the walls of their small home, and every corner seemed to echo with his absence. Her heart ached in ways she hadn't known were possible. Family members whispered behind closed doors, casting glances that weighed her down even more. Neighbors walked past with pity in their eyes, their gossip sharp and unrelenting. Friends came to visit, offering hugs and quiet words, but none of it could fill the hollow that Jelani left. At night, lying on her worn mattress, she pressed her hand to her growing belly and whispered, "I'll keep us safe, even if he won't." The words were both a promise and a lifeline, a fragile hope that she could protect the little life depending on her. Amara's world had shifted in an instant. Betrayal hung in the air like a storm cloud, heartbreak pressed against her chest, and the thought of giving birth without the man she loved terrified her. Yet somewhere deep inside, a spark of determination flickered. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew one thing: she and her unborn child would face it together, no matter what. Amara's days became a constant struggle after Jelani left. Every morning, she woke up to an empty house, the silence pressing against her like a weight. Cooking meals felt harder than usual, not because of the work, but because there was no one to share them with. Every spoonful tasted like loneliness. Visiting the clinic for her checkups was another battle. She would sit in the crowded waiting room, surrounded by women who chatted about their partners and families, while she felt the sharp absence of Jelani beside her. Sometimes she wanted to cry in front of everyone, but she held back, swallowing the tears because she couldn't let herself break down. The whispers from neighbors were relentless. "She's all alone now," some would say. Others shook their heads, as if her pain was a public spectacle. Amara felt their eyes on her wherever she went, weighing her down with judgment and pity. It hurt, but it also made her angry, not at them, but at the situation. She clenched her fists in private, telling herself she wouldn't let their words define her or her child's life. Her mother, Ao, became her anchor. She visited every day, bringing food, small gifts, and words that stitched strength back into Amara's heart. "Your strength will teach him a lesson he'll never forget," Ao said one afternoon, her voice firm but gentle. Amara repeated the words to herself when she felt weak, like a mantra she could hold on to during the loneliest nights. Slowly, she began to focus on the little life growing inside her. She made sure to eat well, attend every clinic appointment, and read about pregnancy, determined to give her baby the best start, even if she had to do it alone. In the quiet moments, she would talk to her unborn child, promising love and safety. "We'll be okay," she whispered. "I'll keep us strong." The shame she felt from the community didn't disappear, but it lost its power over her. She started to carry herself differently, walking with her shoulders back, holding her head high. Every small act, preparing a healthy meal, making it to a doctor's visit, ignoring the gossip, became a declaration of resilience. With each passing day, she planted seeds of courage in her heart, little sparks that would one day grow into the fire she needed to protect herself and her child. Alone in her small home, facing judgment and heartache, Amara discovered a strength she didn't know she had. It was quiet at first, like a small flame in the dark, but it grew steadily, promising that even without Jelani, she and her baby would survive, and maybe even thrive. The rain fell hard that afternoon, drumming against the tin roof of Amara's small home. She was folding clothes, lost in the quiet rhythm, when she heard the knock at the door. Opening it, she froze. There stood Sefu, smiling with that smug, self-assured look she hated. And behind her, as if following on cue, was Jelani, his eyes darting between Amara and Sefu, clearly wanting her attention, wanting a reaction. Amara's heart pounded, but she didn't step back. Instead, she straightened her shoulders and met their eyes. "I'm carrying life, not bitterness," she said calmly, her voice steady despite the storm outside. The words hung in the air, heavier than any rain, and for a moment silence reigned. She could see the shock flicker across their faces. Sefu's confident smile faltered, and Jelani's smugness wavered. For the first time in months, Amara felt something stir inside her. It wasn't just relief, it was a flicker of power, the realization that she could face them without fear. The baby in her womb was her strength, her reason for standing tall, and in that moment, she knew her child would not be born into fear, into shame, or into a home ruled by weakness. Instead, the life she carried would enter a world of courage and resilience, shaped by a mother who refused to crumble. As they stood there, she noticed the subtle change in the neighborhood. Behind the rain-speckled windows, people paused, whispering to one another. No longer were they murmurs of judgment, they were whispers of admiration. Word traveled fast in Kisumu, and Amara could feel the tide shifting. She was no longer the woman defined by Jelani's departure. She was becoming someone who could hold her ground, someone who could command respect even in the most difficult moment. Sefu shuffled awkwardly, clearly unsure what to do, and Jelani shifted from foot to foot, his confidence fading. Amara didn't need to yell, didn't need to plead. Her quiet, steady defiance spoke louder than any words could. She watched them leave, the rain washing away the tension, and a small smile tugged at her lips. Inside, Amara sank into her chair, pressing a hand to her belly. She whispered to her unborn child, "See that? This is the world we'll face. And we'll do it together, strong, unshaken, unafraid." The rain outside was no longer just weather. It was a soundtrack to a new beginning, one where Amara was no longer just surviving but slowly, surely, finding her power. Amara gripped the hospital bed with all her strength, each contraction ripping through her like waves of fire. The labor room was bright and busy, the sounds of monitors beeping and nurses moving around mixing with the occasional cry of a newborn. Yet through it all, she felt utterly alone. Jelani stood at the doorway, his hands in his pockets, refusing to come inside. His absence stung more sharply than any pain she felt, but she focused on the little life inside her, drawing strength from the thought of finally meeting her baby. Hours dragged on, the pain relentless, but Amara refused to give in. Nurses guided her through each push, whispering encouragements, and friends who had rushed to the hospital held her hand, offering comfort and steady support. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she felt the sudden relief, the warm, tiny weight placed on her chest. "It's a boy," a nurse announced, smiling. Amara's eyes filled with tears as she looked down at Tay, her son. The room erupted with joy, friends cheering, nurses clapping, some wiping tears of happiness. But Jelani simply stood there, stunned, unable to move or speak. Then something incredible happened. Tay let out a cry, but it wasn't just a normal newborn wail. His eyes, wide and alert, seemed to take in everything around him with an unusual focus. A nurse, leaning closer, noticed him responding to voices almost immediately, tracking movement with startling clarity. "This baby, he's remarkable," she murmured. Even the doctors were intrigued, examining him with curious excitement. Amara felt a rush of pride and awe. Her child was extraordinary, and it felt like the universe had conspired to show her that leaving Jelani's shadow behind was the right choice. As she cradled Tay, her tears flowed freely, tears of relief, joy, and a fierce sense of vindication. The tables were beginning to turn. The whispers and judgment that had weighed on her for months seemed to vanish in the bright hospital light, replaced with admiration and awe for the strength she had shown and the remarkable baby she had brought into the world. Jelani's face told the story of his own shock and regret. He had walked away thinking he had left her powerless, but here she was, standing tall, bringing life into the world alone, and the child she had carried was already commanding attention in ways he never could. Amara pressed her cheek to Tay's small forehead, whispering, "We did it. We're unstoppable." And in that moment, surrounded by love and awe, she knew her life, and her son's, had changed forever. Life after Tay's birth was both exhausting and full of small victories for Amara. Nights blurred into mornings, with the baby crying, feedings, and the constant weight of responsibility on her shoulder. Yet she was no longer alone in the way she had been during her pregnancy. Her friends came often, carrying food, helping with chores, or simply sitting with her so she could rest. Their support reminded her that strength wasn't about doing everything alone. It was about letting others share the load, and in that she found comfort and empowerment. Omari, a neighbor who had quietly watched over her since Jelani left, became a steady presence in her daily life. He would visit to help with Tay, rocking him to sleep when Amara needed a moment to breathe, fixing things around the house, or running errands she couldn't manage alone. He never overstepped. His support was calm, steady, and unconditional. With each act of kindness, Amara felt a little lighter, a little stronger, realizing that the love of a community could fill spaces she thought were empty forever. Soon, other local women began to take notice. They reached out, sharing their own stories of hardship and survival. They invited Amara to gatherings where they spoke openly about challenges, marriage, betrayal, and motherhood. Listening to them, Amara realized that she wasn't unusual or weak. She was part of a larger story of resilience that many women carried quietly. Their laughter, advice, and shared tears became a source of inspiration, teaching her that strength could grow in community, not just in isolation. Daily struggles, laundry, meals, errands, late-night feedings, no longer felt like burdens alone. Each small success, each kind word from a friend or neighbor, added up. She could see the change in herself. Her shoulders were straighter, her voice steadier, her eyes brighter. The gossiping neighbors, once so quick to judge, began to notice the shift. Whispers of sympathy turned into nods of respect, and some even came forward to offer congratulations or support. Amara's reputation, built slowly through courage and consistency, was transforming into one of admiration. For the first time, she realized something vital. She didn't need Jelani to validate her life. Her identity, her strength, and her ability to thrive came from her own actions, her choices, and the network of people who had rallied around her. Holding Tay in her arms one evening, watching him sleep peacefully, she smiled to herself. The heartbreak that once consumed her now felt like a distant memory. Amara understood that thriving wasn't about erasing the past. It was about building a life so full of love, strength, and community that the past had no power over. And in that life, she and her son would flourish. Amara never imagined that sharing her life online could change so much. It started simply, posting pictures of Tay, little moments of his first smiles, first steps, and the everyday joys of life as a single mother. At first, it was just a way to keep friends updated and celebrate small victories, but soon the messages started coming in. People from Kisumu and beyond were inspired by her story. They admired her strength, her resilience, and the calm determination she showed while raising her son alone. Comments flooded in, words of encouragement, admiration, and gratitude from other women who saw themselves in her journey. Seeing the positive reactions, Amara began to document more intentionally. She shared her daily routines, the challenges she faced, and the lessons she learned along the way. She posted about the late nights, the hospital visits, the quiet moments of doubt, and the triumphs of overcoming them. Each post was honest and raw, showing not just the struggle, but the determination to rise above it. Slowly, her story began to spread, reaching people who didn't even know her personally. Her courage became contagious, sparking conversations about motherhood, resilience, and self-worth. Opportunities began to arrive almost overnight. Invitations for collaborations, community talks, and small speaking events filled her inbox. Amara realized she could turn her experiences into something bigger, a platform that could inspire and empower others. She named her initiative Roots of Resilience, a reflection of how strength could grow from hardship, how life could blossom even after deep pain. The name felt right, like a promise to herself and to the other women who would follow her lead. Through it all, Jelani watched from the sideline. He saw the likes, the shares, the comments praising Amara's courage, and slowly, a bitter regret began to simmer in him. For months, he had assumed she would struggle, that life would bend under the weight of abandonment. But now, her story proved otherwise. She was thriving, building something meaningful, and gaining admiration he could never take away. His absence in her life had not weakened her. It had, in fact, set the stage for her transformation. Amara felt a sense of pride and purpose she had never known before. Every post, every story shared was a small act of empowerment, not just for her, but for anyone who saw that resilience was possible. Tay's laughter in a video, her quiet reflections in a post, the honest truth of her journey. It all became part of a larger narrative, one that celebrated strength, courage, and hope. Sitting with her laptop one evening, Amara looked at her growing audience and smiled. "We've done this," she whispered to Tay, who crawled onto her lap, his small hand resting on her. "This is just the beginning. Our roots are strong, and we're going to grow even higher." In that moment, she knew she was no longer just surviving. She was shaping a story that could inspire an entire community, showing the world what it meant to rise, even when life had tried to knock her down. Jelani returned one afternoon, walking up the dusty path to Amara's home as if nothing had changed. He smiled, that same charming smile that once drew her in, hoping it would work again. But Amara had changed. She was no longer the woman who trembled at his words or allowed his moods to shape her life. She watched him carefully, noticing the nervous twitch in his eyes and the way he lingered too long, as if measuring whether he still had control. "Amara," he began, his voice smooth, trying to sound casual, "I've been thinking, maybe we can figure things out. For Tay's sake." He stepped closer, as if proximity could erase the months of pain and abandonment. But Amara didn't flinch. She held Tay in her arms, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her chest, and with a calm but firm voice, she said, "I am no longer yours to control. My son and I are thriving." The words hit Jelani harder than she expected, and she saw the surprise flicker across his face. He tried to speak again, weaving excuses and soft promises, but each word only highlighted how far he had fallen from the man she once knew. His attempts at charm now felt hollow, even pathetic. Amara's friends, who had gathered nearby to offer support, exchanged quiet nods of approval. They had seen her journey, her rise from heartbreak, and they stood silently, letting her words do the work. Even Sefu, who had once been his reason for leaving, was nowhere in sight. She had distanced herself, leaving Jelani alone to face the consequences of his choices. Without her, he was powerless in a way he hadn't felt before. His past mistakes, walking away from a pregnant Amara, underestimating her strength, were now obvious to everyone, and the humiliation was written clearly on his face. Amara could feel the energy of her growing support around her, the quiet but unmistakable respect from the neighbors who once whispered judgment. Her public image, carefully built through her resilience, her social media initiative, and the life she had created for Tay, stood in stark contrast to Jelani's faltering presence. He was a man trying to reclaim what he had lost, and yet he was powerless against the reality she had shaped with her own hand. She took a deep breath and held her son close, letting her gaze meet Jelani's one last time. No anger flared in her voice, only clarity. "We don't need you. We never did." With that, Jelani turned away, leaving her standing tall. The encounter, meant to regain control, had done the opposite. It confirmed what Amara had known all along. She was strong, independent, and fully capable of shaping her own life. The humiliation he carried would follow him, while she and Tay continued forward, surrounded by love, respect, and a community that had watched her rise and admired her strength. In that moment, Amara felt an unshakable sense of triumph. She was free. Amara stood on the small stage at the community center, the soft murmur of the audience filling the room. Mothers, young women, and even a few men had gathered, curious to hear the woman whose story had been spreading through Kisumu like wildfire. She looked out over the crowd, her heart steady, Tay's picture pinned to her bag as a reminder of why she had come this far. Every whisper, every doubt she had endured over the months had led to this moment. Jelani appeared at the edge of the room, trying to push his way in. He attempted his usual charm, speaking to organizers, trying to cast doubt, but it was useless. The community had already seen the truth. Amara had built a life of strength and respect, and no interruption could shake that. People subtly moved around him, ignoring his presence, and Amara felt a quiet satisfaction. She had anticipated his attempt, but she was prepared. His embarrassment was already beginning. When she spoke, her voice was firm, clear, and alive with emotion. "Leaving me did not weaken me," she said, looking directly at the audience. "It taught me my strength." Every word carried months of struggle, pain, and growth. She shared her story honestly, of heartbreak, raising Tay alone, facing judgment, and the moments she almost gave up but didn't. She spoke about resilience, the power of community, and how women could support each other through life's toughest trials. The audience leaned in, nodding, some with tears in their eyes, recognizing themselves in her journey. News outlets were there too, cameras capturing her every word. Reporters later praised her courage, highlighting how she had turned a personal tragedy into a platform empowerment. Amara's story of single motherhood, resilience, and defiance against judgment became a symbol in Kisumu and beyond. Social media buzzed with clips from her speech, comments from viewers pouring in with messages of support, admiration, and shared experiences. Jelani tried to speak to reporters, trying to spin the story, but it was too late. Amara's voice, her presence, and the unwavering support of the community made his attempts meaningless. He stood awkwardly, powerless, as the spotlight shone entirely on the woman he once thought he could control. As Amara finished, the room erupted in applause. She felt a wave of emotion, relief, pride, and a sense of justice. She had been judged, abandoned, and underestimated, but here she was standing tall, empowered, and supported by a community that believed in her. Later, holding a bouquet of flowers given by women inspired by her talk, Amara smiled. She whispered to herself, "We did it. We're not just surviving, we're thriving." Around her, people continued to celebrate her journey, and somewhere in the crowd, the shadow of Jelani's past mistakes reminded everyone of what happens when strength is underestimated. In that moment, Amara knew the triumph was complete. Her story, her voice, and her life had spoken louder than any betrayal ever could. Tay had always been a special child, but no one expected what happened one sunny afternoon in Kisumu. Amara was sitting in her small living room, folding laundry, when she noticed him standing on his own, balancing perfectly without a hand to hold. She blinked in surprise. He was barely a year old. Then, almost casually, he took a few confident steps toward her, his small feet tapping on the floor with surprising steadiness. Amara gasped, her heart swelling with pride and disbelief. Tay, her little boy, was doing something far beyond what anyone had expected. Word spread quickly. Friends, neighbors, and even distant relatives came by, drawn by the news. They had always admired Amara for her courage, but seeing Tay walk so early made her strength feel tangible, almost magical. People whispered to one another, amazed not just at the child, but at the mother who had nurtured him through hardship, who had faced betrayal, judgment, and loneliness, and still created something extraordinary. Then, Tay did something even more remarkable. He looked at Amara, pointed to a book on the shelf, and clearly said a word she had been teaching him. It wasn't just babbling, it was a complete word, perfectly clear. Amara's breath caught in her throat, tears forming in her eyes. The room went silent for a moment, everyone stunned by the intelligence and awareness shining from such a tiny being. The baby who had been born during her most difficult days was now showing signs of extraordinary potential. Neighbors who once whispered gossip now stood in awe, acknowledging her wisdom and courage. Family members, friends, and women in the community who had watched her struggle leaned in, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others smiling widely, inspired by what they saw. Amara realized that her decision to stay strong, to fight for herself and her child, had created ripples far beyond her own life. Every hardship she had endured had helped shape Tay's remarkable abilities, turning her personal resilience into something tangible and visible for all to see. Holding him close, Amara whispered, "You're my proof, my little miracle. Everything we've been through, it was worth it." Tay reached up, patting her face with his tiny hand, as if understanding every word. The sight of him thriving, so full of life and potential, brought an overwhelming mix of joy, relief, and triumph. That day, the narrative of Amara's life crystallized for everyone around her. She had been abandoned, judged, and underestimated, but she had risen above it all. Tay was living proof that courage, perseverance, and love could transform even the hardest circumstances. In that moment, Amara felt a deep sense of victory, not just for herself, but for the life she had created, the community she had inspired, and the legacy of strength she was building for her son. Everyone who witnessed it left with the same understanding. Amara's choices had shaped something extraordinary, and nothing could ever diminish the power of what she had built. Years had passed, and Kisumu had come to know Amara not just as a mother, but as a symbol of strength and empowerment. Her small foundation, Roots of Resilience, had grown steadily, helping single mothers rebuild their lives. Women who had once struggled in silence found jobs, mentorship, and a community where their voices mattered. Amara walked among them, teaching resilience not as an abstract idea, but as a lived experience, sharing her story of heartbreak, courage, and the determination that had carried her through the darkest days. Jelani's name had faded from the conversations that mattered. He was now a memory of the past, a symbol of mistakes and regret. He had long been left behind by the life Amara had built, and while he occasionally glimpsed her from afar, there was no place for him in the story she was writing now, a story of triumph, love, and purpose. One afternoon, as she watched Tay playing in the garden of the foundation, she smiled down at him. His laughter was bright, his energy uncontainable, and she felt the full circle of their journey in that moment. "You see, some departures hurt," she whispered softly, brushing a strand of hair from his face, "but they also shape greatness." Tay looked up, eyes shining, as if understanding every word, and Amara felt a warmth that went beyond pride. It was a deep, unshakable peace. Amara had turned pain into purpose, betrayal into opportunity, and heartbreak into a platform that lifted others. Her story resonated with the community and beyond, inspiring countless women to see strength where they had once only seen struggle. And in that, she knew she had done more than survive. She had created a life of meaning, love, and hope, proving that true empowerment grows from the courage to rise, no matter how deep the fall.